What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. Today, we're gonna go over our last set of builds for y'all and the last video before the final shape, taking Sunday and Monday off just to mentally prepare for all the craziness that we are about to get on Tuesday with Prismatic, the final shape, the Witness, the Traveler, the end to the Dark and Light saga. It is going to be disgusting, but hopefully y'all like the two videos I put out the last 2 days with our Warlock and Titan builds that I am personally taking into the final shape. But today we're going over our Hunter builds, which is a slept on class for me. Definitely don't play it as much as I should, but we are going to go over what I am taking in to obviously go through that story, get some of the exotics on this character as well. And we are starting out with a Stasis Renewal Grass build, so you can see on this nice infograph right here all of the Stasis builds that are coming in changes to the sandbox for the good old final shape. Thank you to Blueberry GG for the infographics. They put out some bangers. Their website will be in the description, so make sure to check that out. But you can read all of these nice changes that we are getting with some new fragments, as well as changes to old ones, and a little bit of changes to our aspects supers, where Hunter definitely got a good little buff in my opinion. As for our first armor piece right here, we're going to be using the Renewal Grasp, like I said, with the depths of Duskfield. Your Duskfield grenades have a much larger area of effect, and allies inside the Duskfield take reduced damage, which it is a good amount of reduced damage, and targets inside also deal reduced damage, so you feel like you can stay alive forever. If you're facing somebody like a boss, throw it at their feet, go inside of there with a sword, something like that, you're gonna take less damage, they're gonna deal less damage. It is a match made in heaven. As for abilities, aspects, fragments, and stats, I went with 100 in the resilience as my first choice, with 100 in the Duskfield discipline as my second, and then 100 in strength for my melee as the third option. We're going to be using that newly buffed Silence and Squall, of course, with the Gambler's Dodge, so we can get back our Withering Blade a little bit quicker, even with 100 in the Strength category. For me, on basically all of these Hunter builds inside of PvE, I think literally all of them I use Triple Jump, so that is definitely my go-to. Next off, we got the Withering Blade. Like I said, we toss those Stasis Shurikens to damage and slow targets. We can also freeze them when we apply enough of that slow, so very good at ad management, stunning overloads, stunning unstoppables and such, plus pairs perfectly with the Stasis side of this build. And those Renewal Grasp, of course, we are going to be using the Duskfield grenades, so they slow targets, freeze them, of course, and it pairs with that damage resistance that we are getting, and the reduced damage that enemies will also do. Now, on top of that, we're going to be using Grim Harvest, defeating those slowed or frozen combatants, create Stasis Shards, which we are also using on our weapon. This Stasis Shards grant melee energy when picked up by allies, as well as us, so we are going to be able to have our Withering Blade all the time. Second touch of a winter right here, that Duskfield has increased slow size and creates a Stasis Crystal on impact. This does stack with Renewal, so it's going to be even bigger than just with the Renewal Grass. Definitely a go-to. We got 5 fragments with Whisper of Rhyme. The first one right here, those changes obviously inside of that little picture that I showed, but collecting those fragments grants us a little bit of an overshield. Collecting additional shards just refreshes that timer. Next off, all those shards that we are creating with this build are going to track to our position. Third, we have increased damage and size burst of those Stasis Crystals when we destroy either a crystal or a frozen target, so with this build, definitely going to have a bunch of those around. On top of that, Whisper of Chains, when we are near frozen targets or a friendly Stasis Crystal, we take even more damage reduction, pairs with Renewal Grasp on top of that. And last but certainly not least, Whisper of Durance slows that we apply to targets last longer, and abilities linger longer, so that Duskfield is lasting even longer. This is a wild build in my personal opinion that we are taking into the final shape. Then I do really like pairing that with the Wicked Implement, because it has a slowing trait by itself, plus it overflows on collecting those Stasis Shards, so very good combo. Next two I got for you are Void builds. Again, nothing too crazy changing on the Void side of things, especially inside of the PvE realm. A little bit with Stylish Executioner, Glaive melees can also proc that. Trapper's Ambush a little bit longer in the linger and the ground geometry, so better tracking, if you will, with the Snare Bomb also having an increased linger duration. So nothing too crazy in those changes, but they are going to feel pretty solid inside of the PvE realm when you test them out. Now, the first exotic with these void builds is going to be Orpheus Rig, so we can basically have infinite abilities up as well as use our super very consistently with Uncanny Arrows, provides ability energy for each target tethered by the Deadfall anchor. Mobius Quiver has additional shots, so totally up to you which one you use. Mobius usually is a little bit more damage or on the damage side if you're using it, but I personally use Deadfall because of its ability to just tether everybody, and we get it back almost instantly when we're getting defeats of those enemies inside of it. As for our abilities, aspects, fragments, and stats, again, I went for 100 in that resilience, and then I went as high as I could in recovery, discipline, as well as my intellect. They are at 70 each on this build, so totally up to you in your game style to pick and choose which one of those that you want, but I would go with resilience first and then pick and choose between those next three. Like I said, we're going to be using that Deadfall Super, which is the single shot tether, and then Gambler's Dodge, so we can have our Snare Bomb back as often as possible with those changes to it. Nice little increased duration. Like I said, triple jump on basically all of my PvE builds for Hunter. I usually only use the strafe jump inside of the Crucible. Melee, of course, we got the Snare Bomb for that weakening aspect, and then we're going to use it for Trapper's Ambush as well for that nice increased linger duration that it's going to have. I personally like Scatter Grenades on this build because it has a very big AoE, very good to pair and throw inside of a tether for a nice big explosion. You could go with a good old Vortex Grenade, but this comes back way faster, so I definitely like the Scatter. Now for me, got that Trapper's Ambush, like I said, for quick fall. The Smoke Cloud on the impact via our nice little Snare Bomb is going to make us invisible, weaken targets, and make allies invisible, plus that increased duration with the linger of the smoke is going to be happening on this as well, so definitely throwing this on. Next off is Vanishing Step. At least for me, I really like using this so we can stay invisible as often as possible with this, and Gambler's Dodge comes back very quickly, so Vanishing Step is definitely a good thing to have on. As for fragments, Echo of a Reprisal. Final blows when surrounded by combatants give us super energy, so another way for us to get our super back even faster compared to with the Orpheus Rigs, and the Deadfall adds on to that heavily. Next off, we got Echo of Persistence, so those void debuffs, that invisibility, devour, overshield, have increased duration. Picking up those void breaches or orbs of power is going to give us devour, so this plus that invisibility is going to have a nice good long time because of reprisal and duration and starvation. And last but not least, we're going to use Echo of Instability on this build, so grenades are going to grant volatile rounds to our void weapons, just a little bit more for that damage output as well as the egg clear side of this, but the tether and Orpheus is really all you need. Moving on to the second void build, this is personally my favorite option. Orpheus is a close second, but Omnioculus, we get that nice resistance. With Beyond the Veil, we get a second smoke bomb charge and have damage resistance while invisible. When we make us and allies invisible, we gain a nice damage resistant and melee energy back. So when we make a bunch of allies invisible, like in a raid, we're able to get a smoke bomb back instantly. So it is like an instant invisibility glitch, if you will, having it back all the time with Trapper's Ambush, and we're going to be using a dodge on this build, so it is pretty disgusting. As for our stats, abilities, fragments, aspects, I went with that resilience at 100, strength at 100 for 2, and then if you would like, mobility at 100 for number 3, so you can use that dodge often as well as Trapper's Ambush often. Now for super, totally up to you between Deadfall and Mobius Quiver. As for the dodge, I went with Marksman, so we can reload and go invisible all at the same time. I went with triple jump, of course, just like all my other Hunter builds inside of PvE. We're using that Snare Bomb, of course, that's getting a little bit of buff to it, plus we need it for the invisibility of Omnioculus and the Trapper's Ambush. With last, the Vortex Grenade, easily the longest time at 230, but it also has a very good AoE effect and does the most damage, I think, in my personal opinion. Aspects first, of course, we got the Trapper's Ambush for that quick fall. We are getting the invisibility, damage resistance, and weaken on those enemies. With those snare bombs, we're getting it back because of Omnioculus. Plus, we have it so we can throw it out, attach it to enemies or our fellow guardians if they are in trouble. Throw it towards them. It is a very good aspect that we have, especially with Omnioculus. Next, just like the other Void build, we got dodging makes us invisible with Vanishing Step. That's why we're trying to throw this a little bit higher with the mobility of the stats being higher than our other build, but we're getting it consistently with our snare bombs as well, so totally up to you. Fragments are going to be also very similar with Echo of Reprisal. Final blows by Surrounded gain us even more super energy, so we can use that tether as often as possible. Echo of Persistence, just like the other one, Invisibility, Overshield, Devour have increased duration. Echo of Instability, we're going to have those volatile rounds on Void weapons when we get defeats with our grenade, making it a very good way to clear a bunch of ads with that volatility. And last but not least, Echo of Starvation, picking up those breaches or orbs of power, give us Devour, which is very good with staying alive. Definitely my favorite Void verbs. So literally the same basic setup inside of our subclass for this and Orpheus rigs, just a little bit of a change in the dodge. Both very good Void builds. Next on the list is a Star Eaters build. I have it personally on Solar right now because of going through Pantheon, but you can use Star Eaters on any subclass. Very good on the Arc Hunter for sure, but Star Eaters, it's going to require a higher number of orbs for the maximum benefit, and we're going to create less inside a Golden Gun next season, so that is something to take into effect. Plus, for the Solar subclass on this build, knock them down. That throwing knife refund cooldown is going down, which is super nice for us, as well as the light knife. We gain an additional charge by default, and it has a faster throwing speed, so nothing too crazy for the ability changes, but just know that the good old Star Eater skills is getting a little bit of a nerf, but I promise it's not going to be that noticeable. You're just going to have to pick up more orbs, but you're usually picking up more than enough anyways before you pop it with the Feast of Light right here. So we gain additional super energy from picking up orbs of power. While super is full, we gain a Feast of Light stack that causes our super to do way more damage. Definitely was a go-to in Nezarect with the Golden Gun, like I said. Celestial also up there. That'll be my next build, kind of pairing it with this one at least because they are both solar, but like I said, Star Eaters is definitely more versatile. Can throw it really on any subclass you want. Strand, solar, everything like that. So way more versatile than Celestial, but it did get that little nerf. As for the stats and the abilities that we have on this, for me, I went with the Marksman Golden Gun for those orbs of power, but that did get nerfed. Stats, I went with Resilience at 100. We went with my Intellect at 100, so that's 1 and 2, with Recovery being number 3 for those stats that I built into. Marksman Dodge was my class ability, comes back pretty quick, plus I use it to reload quickly, especially for those damage phases. Triple Jump, of course, like I said, nothing changes there. With the changes, you could go with that lightweight knife, but I personally like Knife Trick with the old fan. Very good at scorching targets, very good to hit a bunch and do a good amount of damage. Personally went with the Healing Grenade, especially in that -20 Pantheon, kept us alive with Restoration and Cure on our allies, so very nice for that endgame content. Knock them down right here. That little cooldown, like I said, went down. Well, Radiant, final blows with your equipped throwing knife, fully refund that melee energy, so very good at spamming our fan knife over there, as well as that Marksman Golden Gun has increased duration, so you could really switch that on and off. Totally up to you. If you want to do Blade Barrage, would also work very good with this build, since that Marksman Golden Gun is going to create us less orbs of power. We got Gunpowder Gamble, so those solar abilities, solar debuff or solar weapon final blows, charge up a good old big explosion that we throw out in our grenade slot, so you can throw this out and then heal yourself right back to back with the Gunpowder Gamble grenade, and then you're healing. As for fragments on this Ember of Empyrean, so we have those solar weapon ability, final blows extend the duration of a Restoration and Radiant. Ember of Torches, getting ourselves Radiant with that melee attack, and then we're gonna have our good old knife up consistently because of Knock 'em Down, and then we're gonna have that beautiful synergy of Torches with Empyrean, keeping up that Radiant consistently. Next off, we're gonna have Ember of Beams, so either your Marksman or Blade Barrage is going to have better target acquisition, just just make sure that you're not missing your headshots or anything like that. And last but not least, applying Restoration Cure or Radiant to allies grants us increased melee, grenade, and class ability regeneration, so allows us to spam our grenade, melee, and dodge on this build. Very, very good fragment just in general. Use it on a lot of my solar builds. Now, very similar here, but in the damage side, specifically for Golden Gun, not like Star Eaters can be on any of our subclasses. We got Hawkeye Hack, Precision Final Blows, reduce the cooldown of our super, modified Golden Gun to a single high damage shot. Targets defeated by this shot give us super energy and explode. We are using it for some just good, juicy damage on some of those bosses. Definitely was using it on things like Oryx inside of the -20 Pantheon, as well as actually inside of Golgi. Use Star Eater and this, and they were doing a good amount of damage. So we'll go this over the Star Eaters for overall damage, but they were close. Very similar setup with a little changes, abilities, aspects, and fragments. Still went with 100 in that resilience as our first option, 100 in intellect as our second, with 100 in recovery as our third. Now again, with this, I'm going to be using the marksman because it's that single shot, super high power, benefits from being radiant, so we are able to juice the damage with celestial in that. We're going to be using marksman's dodge, of course, with the triple jump, never leaves the PvE hunter. Knife, totally up to you. Knife trick is what I personally like to use again, but the changes to the old lightweight knife is a very good change that's coming with the additional charge, plus throwing it a little bit faster. Grenade, totally up to you. I personally went with healing. I love to stay alive in that endgame content, especially in Pantheon -20 when I did all this recording. And in that nice story that we're going to get, it's definitely going to be a good way to stay alive. Aspects, I went with knock them down again, so that Golden Gun has increased duration, while Radiant, we're going to have a fully refund our melee energy with our throwing knives on those final blows, so a good way to keep Radiant, etc. up. This time we're going to be using on your mark, so precision final blows, since Celestial is also giving us additional super energy on those precision final blows, we, as well as our allies, gain weapon handling and reload speed, stacking up to ×3. Dodging stacks is up to max stacks already, so very good at the DPS side, having that faster reload and handling, switching on and off of weapons. Fragment's going to be similar, yet a little bit different. Ember of Mercy, when we revive an ally, we are going to gain a restoration as well as they are, as well as picking up Fire Sprites, grant us restoration. Fire Sprites also are going to give us grenade energy for that healing grenade. Ember of Torches again, so all of those knives in the fan knives up there are going to give us that radiant, as well as knock them down. Fully refunding that energy is going to be super nice with Ember of Torches. Like I said before, we got Ember of Benevolence as well, so when we apply Restoration Cure and Radiant to those allies, we gain increased melee, grenade, and class ability regeneration, so just allowing us again to spam those consistently. Fourth on the list, Ember of Searing, is where we are creating those fire sprites by defeating scorched targets. We're going to get additional melee energy as well. Again, another way for us to have our knife up consistently for that radiance, as well as the benevolence, spreading that around to spam our grenade, melee, and dodge. With the last one being Ember of Beams, so we're getting that 100 in the intellect easily with this because of +10. Plus, that golden gunshot is going to have better target acquisition, so we're going to make sure we hit that precision shot every single time. Definitely is a staple in the DPS side of things, but isn't as versatile, like I said, as something like Star Eater scales, because you can use Gathering Storm, you can use your Strand Super on it, you could even use Tether if you really wanted. With Mobius, you have those 3 shots, but definitely between the two, Celestial, better overall for Solar, but versatility-wise, definitely Star Eaters. Only got 2 builds left for y'all. This one right here is going to be a Lucky Pants build. Definitely super juicy. Can use this as well on any subclass. I again have it built out for Solar just because it was feeling very, very good in -20 Pantheon. Plus, I was able to get my super very, very often, in my personal opinion. Illegally modded holster. When you ready a fully loaded hand cannon that deals kinetic damage or a damage type that matches your subclass. Also, why why it's very versatile. Each hit from the hand cannon increases the damage of the next shot. Hand cannons ready faster and are more accurate immediately after swapping to them, provides a modified airborne effectiveness to all hand cannons, so not really important for the PvE realm, but this thing is super juicy, especially with a couple different hand cannons that really pair well with this. First hand cannon that I use often with this is right here with the Warden's Law. Obviously, it doesn't have to be adept, but with 4th times the charm, getting those precision shots, returning them to the magazine with Frenzy, we're getting this 15% damage increase on top of a legally modded holster, and then we're basically able to shoot forever with 4 times the charm, so we can just juice the damage on those bosses. For exotics, something like the Malfeasance is also very good for those kinetic slots because of that explosive shadow. Having these stacking slugs that explode with illegally modded holster allows for some pretty gnarly DPS, especially if that boss is in the taken side. This does a little intrinsic damage more to those, so definitely 2 of the hand cannons that I use. As for abilities, aspects, and fragments, just go back to our last gunslinger with Celestial. They are literally the exact same as they are in this Lucky Pants video, because I am going to be using that Marksman's Golden Gun on this build for the DPS. Like I said, I was able to get this twice on something like Caretaker. On the first blade, I could pop it with the damage I was getting and the amount of super I was getting from that kinetic damage and a legally modded holster. I was able to get another one on the 3rd place, so it was absolutely disgusting. Then we're using just the normal stuff: Mercy, Torches, Benevolence, Searing, Beams. Literally, like I said, the exact same abilities, aspects, and fragments as the Celestial build. Last but not least, one of my favorite builds for Hunter, for sure, the 6 Coyote double dodge strand build. So obviously nothing too crazy with the armor perk. Literally double dodge, we gain a 2nd dodge charge, but we're going to be using this with the strand subclass, allowing us to have a double shackle grenades, double ensnaring slam, and with not too much on the Hunter side of strand things changing, it is going to be a very consistent build that isn't changing much inside of the final shape, and I use this all the time to get through wave 50 onslaughts, as well as I took it into some of the Pantheon as well when it was strand burn. On this build, of course, we got our Silk Strike as our super. With our stats that I went with mobility and resilience as my #1 choices. I went with resilience as my #1, mobility as my #2, and then discipline as my #3. As for our abilities, Marksman Dodge was our class ability with triple jump. Like I said, always my dodge, always my jump, basically inside of the PvE realm. Now we do have Threaded Spike right here, severing enemies, giving us a nice refund of energy when we catch it at the right time, depending on the number of targets that it hits. So a good little aspect that we got. Plus it didn't change at all in PvE realm, just a little bit for the PvP, not breaking invisibility, stuff like that. Next we got the Shackle Grenade, which is another way that we're going to be able to suspend targets. So we're going to have a double ensnaring slam, plus this, it's absolutely nuts, plus a bunch of tangles, which we are using for our aspects, which you will see in a second. First aspect is that ensnaring slam. Like I said, we activate our air move to consume our class ability, go down, slam on the ground, and suspend all of those targets. So we're gonna have 2 of these in a row, plus that Shackle Grenade to basically infinitely have a suspend up on enemies. On top of that, we're gonna be using Whirlwind Maelstrom. So all those tangles that we are creating via these suspended targets are going to be very easy to clear out with these Whirlwind Maelstroms. Those tangles create a nice little shuriken that spins around and also unravels targets. So on top of that, we're going to be creating even more tangles because of that unravels. So very good internal feedback loop. Last, for our fragments down here, we got Thread of Mind. So defeating those suspended targets grants us class ability, so we can have that double ensnaring slam up as often as possible. Thread of Binding right here, so creating even more suspension bursts from our super, which allows us to have even more tangles and more unravel in that whirlwind maelstrom. Absolutely disgusting combination. Obviously, the goat for strand fragments, thread of generation, dealing damage, generates us our grenade energy, so we're gonna have that shackle up consistently as well. And then last but not least, of course, with the thread of continuity right here, we're gonna have suspend, unravel, and sever have increased duration. We're gonna get all of these: sever from our melee, unravel from those whirlwind maelstrom, and then suspend, of course, from our grenade as well as our slams. And then we're also getting unravel from a weapon choice if we have it inside of our artifact, something like that. So it's gonna be absolutely nasty, the amount of tangles that we get with this build and the amount of suspension we get. So it is definitely one of my favorites, definitely top 3 on Hunter just in general. But again, nice long video for you guys covering some of my favorite builds that I think are going to be tried and true in the final shape. Obviously, Prismatic is coming out that we are going to use a bunch as well, but these will be tried and true, like I said, for that end game day 1 raid if you would like to go through that story mode on Legendary, obviously. But again, I appreciate all you guys for coming back to the channel, supporting me like you have. Don't be afraid to like and subscribe. Helps me out, helps the channel out a bunch. Plus, you can slap that bell if you have not, so you can get all of those notifications for these builds, etc., that we have here on the channel, plus all the wonderful content we're going to be coming out with in the final shape, because it is going to be hot and heavy. Like I said, taking the next 2 days off to mentally prepare for that, because we are going to go hard on Tuesday. So again, I appreciate all you guys again. I will catch you guys in the final shape. So see you guys there. Peace.